I'm Dr. Luann Fortune, and I welcome you to Mindfulness Practices with Your Animal Friends today. This is an offering of our Mind Body Medicine program, Mindfulness Moments, and we hold these live every Monday at 9:15 Pacific time, except once a month. We offer a 1-hour workshop in the pursuit of mind-body techniques. And today we're doing something very special. We are going to be going through a presentation with some demonstration of mindfulness practices with your animal friends. Next slide, please. I would like to thank my colleagues, Dr. Valerie Worthington, Dr. Betz King, and Dr. Carlos Santo for joining us today. I also want to acknowledge Kelli Hughart, who's one of our dissertation doctoral candidates here who helped contribute to this presentation. She cannot be with us today, but we're very grateful for her many contributions. I would also like to frame this consistent with Saybrook's mission of humanistic approaches, humanistic psychology, humanistic ways of being within our client-centered framework. Dr. Valerie Worthington will be talking a little bit more about that in a moment. And if you are working with your animal today, if they are partnering with you and joining you for this presentation, we will begin with a portion to emphasize how important the partnership is. So please honor their requests as we go through this and keep in mind that their autonomy is the key to a successful partnership. Dr. Worthington, I'd like to hand it over to you now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fortune, and welcome to everybody. As Dr. Fortune said, this is a very special mindfulness workshop that we have, and our agenda is simple, and we hope it will be very meaningful for you. We're going to start with introducing some frameworks and some conceptual tools that can help us understand how we can deepen even further our relationships with our animal companions and animal friends through mind-body medicine. As Dr. Fortune mentioned, we're operating from a client-centered model, which bespeaks the Saybrook framework and orientation. And it's important, as she said, also to make sure that you are respecting your animal friend's autonomy and needs. So we'll start out with Dr. King, who will do sort of a philosophical exploration of the relationship between human and non-human animals. And then we'll do sort of some more hands-on activities. And then we'll follow that with some more discussion, and then we'll do some Q&A. So now if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So as you're preparing to engage with this presentation and with your animal friend, make sure to create a grounded setting, to center yourself, to pay attention to the cues that your animal friend is giving you, and to make sure that there's limited engagement, and to begin gently and gradually, and always to be checking in with your animal friend to make sure that what you're doing is okay with them, and to recognize that each animal and partnership is unique. And as I pass it over to Dr. King, who is going to take us through a philosophical exploration, I just wanted to mention that we have a link to Saybrook's humanistic approach, and I will share that in the chat. And what that does is it'll give you the opportunity to see how what we're talking about here is very aligned with who we are as Saybrook. So, Dr. King, I want to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Dr. Betz King. I'm core faculty in the clinical psychology program at Saybrook. I've been interested in human-animal interactions since 2008, when I began working with my canine co-therapist, Paisley. I've given a lot of thought to our relationships with animals, and I'm so happy to be the one to set the framework for all that we'll talk about today: how to have mindful moments with our animal companions, which really starts with our attitude. So I'm going to go back to 1923, Martin Buber. I am not a philosopher, and I am not well versed in the work of Buber. I was taught to conceptualize therapy as an I-thou relationship back in my master's program, and that's the context that I'll be sharing here. So Buber was an existential philosopher. He was known for a philosophy of dialogue, which suggested that the fundamental fact of human existence is a dialogue. Just think about that for a second. The fundamental fact of human existence is a dialogue that takes place in what he called the sphere of between. And his relational philosophy was concerned with the way that we address each other and the world. And while we do address each other linguistically with words, Buber suggests that we also address each other through the quality of the presence that we offer up to each other. And that plays out in our relationships to nature, our relationships with each other, and our relationships to spiritual life. So in 23, Buber wrote Ich und du. If anyone can speak German and do that better than me, please, but it means I and thou. And in that book, he posited that life finds its meaningfulness in I-thou relationships with others, that each person has a divine spark within them, and that to encounter the divine fully, one must encounter the other fully and also be fully encountered by them. Next slide, please. According to Buber, there are two ways that you can be in a relational presence with someone, and he called them I, it, and I, thou. So I, it is a transactional, objectifying way of addressing another person. There's a quid pro quo. You're only listening till it's your time to talk. You want something, you need something from the other person. It's objectifying and usually located temporarily in the past because you're not really seeing what's in front of you. You're kind of running on old schemas and just trying to get it done. An I-thou relationship, however, is an encounter, and it's grounded in presence and recognition that the moment is sacred. Next slide, please. I offer for your consideration that these same relational principles can be applied to the animals we share our lives with. And for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to use the word pet to describe the I-it relationships and the phrase animal companion to describe the I-thou relationships. I am not judging any of us for using the word pet. I'm going to make a mistake and use it sometime in this presentation. I'm just introducing us all to a new way to think about the animals that we consider our family members. Next slide, please. So when we think of pets as an I-it transaction, we are only partially engaged with them. So I might be typing here and the cat walks across my keyboard and I just sort of slide him off and I'm irritated. Or I'm typing and Bodhi hits my elbow with his head, which he's known to do. And I'm like, I just need 5 more minutes, okay? Or there's an accident. Someone has an accident and I might blame them when we know that animals don't have accidents without good reason, right? So we're only partially engaged with our animals and our transactions can be manipulative. We might view the pet, I'm using that word now, as lesser than human. We might talk about owning them like they are a possession. There might be a belief that they should come when they are called and they should behave. There might be training with shock collars or fear methods. And often they're required to exhibit specific behaviors to receive affection. Like if you sit, I'll give you this cookie, or to exhibit specific behaviors to avoid pain. As long as you don't bark, your shock collar won't go off. And the emotional support animal phenomena really is a good example of this because great time and energy was spent on what the emotional support animal can do for the person, and very little time has ever been spent looking at whether or not the emotional support animal is enjoying the process. And while some of them do, I can guarantee you, for instance, that the pig, the emotional support pig at Michigan State, who had to climb up the 4 flights of stairs multiple times a day, was not enjoying that. So these transactions are temporarily located in the past. And what this means is if Bodhi hits my elbow and I shush him and push him away, I'm not seeing Bodhi today in the here and now. I'm seeing my schema of all dogs ever in my life, right? Whereas if I really looked at him, I might see his tail tucked or his ears back, or I might notice that he's trying to tell me something. But because I'm not fully present, I'm missing that. Next slide, please. Contrary to that would be animals as an I-thou relationship. And these are relational. And that means they're mutual and they're reciprocal. So here is me sitting with Willow and Morgan, who both wanted to sit in the chair with me while I worked. And that seemed like they have free will and that's where they want to be. So we made it work. I wanted to find the word animal companion so you know how it's different than pet. I'm using the phrase animal companion to describe the animals with whom we share a relationship of mutual regard. And it's grounded in the belief that both parties are equal in their expression of divinity. And so the examples would be the animals who share our homes and our hearts, the animals in our nearby nature, natural world, bird feeders, deer in the backyard, things like that, and the animals who help us in work, life, and play. And these I-thou encounters spontaneously unfold in the here and now. They are vulnerable, they are live. If Bodhi comes up and he hits my elbow, what I do in real life is I look at the clock and I go, 12:11, okay, I have 4 minutes. I'm going to see if I can mindfully pet you for 4 minutes and I'm going to try to outlast you and see who lasts longer. He always wins. But that would be a here and now conversation that we're having, as opposed to me making him fit into my time frame. Next slide, please. So how do we change our pets into animal companions? I think we just bring a little spirituality into it. And let's define that word. Spirituality usually involves seeking and exploring deeper meanings and purpose in life. It's often associated with a sense of connection to something greater than oneself. Could be the universe, could be nature, could be a higher power. Spirituality can be pursued independently of any religious tradition, and it's often personal and subjective. So by bringing a spiritual focus to our animal companions, we're honoring our trans-species connections, and our personal and subjective knowing is our truth. Our connection to our animals brings meaning, it gives purpose, it's a spiritual encounter. Next slide, please. So how do we bring a spiritual focus to our animal companionship? We do this by recognizing them as companions. To recognize means to validate or to honor. So we recognize our animal companions as sentient beings with free will. Bodhi wants to go out 20 times a day. He has free will. I'm going to try to help him do that if I can. We recognize our animal companions as equals rather than subordinates. We're all going to sit in the chair if everybody wants to sit in the chair. We recognize them as family members rather than possessions. And we recognize, protect, and promote their autonomy while also keeping them safe. And lastly, I probably don't have to tell any of you this, but we recognize that our human-animal encounters are actually spiritually informed encounters. I cut out a video of my friend who was co-regulating with her cat because I wanted to leave more time for other things. Co-regulating is a way of using the consent practice that Dr. Fortune is going to show us in a little bit, and co-regulating our nervous system with our animal companions. And this is very similar to some of the other techniques that you're going to see, but I did want to mention it, and I'm happy to tell you more about it if you want to email me. Our contact information will be on the final slide. Next slide, please. So spiritually focused or mindfully focused animal companion requires a companion, not a pet. Now, I'm a teacher and I love a good teaching acronym. So here you go. This is how you can remember. Companion. The C stands for consider your animal companion a sentient being with free will. Observe and respond to your companion's feelings. Mindfully interact in the present here and now moment. Be here now. Pursue ongoing training in animal communication and body language. Acknowledge your commitment to your animal companion as one of your protected, promoted core values. Nurture ongoing enrichment activities with your animal companion. They need things to do all day long, and it's harder than you would think to keep them busy. Integrate interdependency and mutuality in your relationships. That can be tricky to do, especially if you've got more than one animal, which many of us do. Oversee body language, elimination, and eating habits closely, and nourish your animal companion's body with food, mind with enrichment, and spirit with love and wonder. I can't stress enough the importance of speaking the same language as your animal companion. The magnitude of animal body language that is missed or misunderstood It's really heartbreaking. An I thou encounter with an animal companion can only really happen if you can have a dialogue, right? That's what Buber said. He thought that conversation was holy ground. You can't really have a dialogue with your animal companion if you're not familiar with their body language, their rhythms, and their preferences. There are lots of resources and lots of great books on this. So in summary, I invite you to help me replace the word pet with the phrase animal companion, and to help spread the word that our animal companions are actually our spiritual companions, and that our trans-species interactions really are truly holy ground. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. King. Now it's time for us to move into some actual hands-on techniques. Before we do that, one additional slide that can sort of help us synthesize what Dr. King shared with us and take us into the next portion of this presentation. So next slide, please. So consistent with what Dr. King has been talking about, we wanted to point out for you this framework called the 5 Freedoms for Animals, in which animals are seen to have the right to freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, and disease, freedom to express normal behavior, and freedom from fear and distress. And if we start to think about our animal companions in the way that Dr. King is inviting us to, the segue to the notion of pet lifestyle wellness is actually quite simple and seamless, and it makes perfect sense. So this pyramid is something that Kelli Hughart had put together. And like Dr. Fortune said, she's unfortunately not able to be here with us. But Dr. Fortune is actually going to take us into a couple of practices and opportunities that we can do directly with our animal companions. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Fortune.
Thank you, Dr. Worthington. So I am Luann Fortune. In addition to being a professor in the Department of Mind-Body Medicine, I am also a licensed massage therapist. I'm board certified, and I've been doing that work for 30 years. So I come to this presentation as a professional toucher. However, the techniques I'm going to show us today are those that you can do at home. And I want to spend just a few minutes giving you a framework before we actually go into the work. If you have your animal companion with you, and if they are interested in participating, then I encourage you to invite them in. First of all, a little bit of a framework. Next slide, please. There is evidence to support body work for animals, and that is our canines, our equines, our felines, and far beyond. So out of the scholarly literature, we will find studies having to do with the support of muscular massage for reduced pain. There is some evidence to show benefits to heart rate. There is also performance-related research, numerous equine studies about this. But one thing I will ask you to consider is that the therapeutic model of rehab is best done by a trained expert. And even if you are consulting a trained massage therapist, you'll want to see if they are certified and credentialed and properly trained in the area for which you are seeking support. However, there's a whole other way of looking at this. And one of the things that we know from the studies in medical anthropology, in human development, as well as looking specifically at health and wellness, is that there are benefits to having animal companions with us in our lives. So pet ownership, and I cite the literature, is linked to a higher quality of life in individuals. And one of the things that is pointed out is that that could possibly be related to the experience of touch. Now, saying that, I'd also avoid any touch or intrusion of touching with any animals that are not receptive, any animals that might be potentially aggressive, and this is again right out of the literature, and to gradually introduce touch as a way of communicating and being with your animal. Next slide, please. I'm going to demonstrate in just a while touching techniques that you can do at home. And I would encourage you again, first of all, to ask permission from your animal to create the setting. And what I'm going to show you soon is something that we've already been working on, me and my animal companion. So you will want to create the setting. You'll want to center yourself, first of all, and breathe, because any of your tightness, anxiety, stress comes through your hands in ways that is so perceivable to those who are not communicating with us primarily through words, but through our body language and through our touch. I'm going to walk you through a series of holding and then doing several strokes that are out of the classic massage book: effleurage, petrissage, some vibration, some compression, some pressure point, and then coming to a point of closure. I want to stress that the strokes themselves are not the experience. This is true whether we're working with humans doing massage, with horses, dogs, parrots, boa constrictors. It does not change the model. So I am introducing you to touching techniques in a Rogerian model of, first of all, creating the setting. Next slide, please, because I also want to touch on Tellington Touch, which was developed and introduced by Linda Tellington back in the 1980s, 1990s as a type of touch therapy to have particular approach to the nervous system. So it is meant to be calming, relaxing, to reduce swelling, to reduce inflammation. There is very little risk associated as long as your animal companion is receptive to the touch. So I'm going to show you a few of those strokes as well that have to do with a particular movement, a particular technique that can be applied in conjunction with regular massage and also done on its own. And as I do that, I will also demonstrate how you can best position your hands. So at this point, I wonder, April, could you take down these slides and let's see if Luca is ready to join me. We've already had a conversation about this earlier today, and he has been waiting for this time. So this is Luca. Luca is my companion greyhound, and he had a little bit of a massage already earlier. So you might notice that he is already in a state of deep relaxation. The very first thing I want to do is I want to check in with Luca to make sure that he is receptive. So checking in, can you hear and see me okay over there on the other side? All right, good. All right. Hello, Luca. Would you like a massage? You would. Okay. All right. Sometimes what he'll actually do is paw back at me. Sometimes I need to watch whether or not that means he does not want any additional touch or whether or not he indeed is touching me back. Yes. So shall we get started? We have a creative setting here. I've been playing some lullaby music for Luca earlier today. He's in a soft place. It's warm. There's a little bit of light. And I am first of all going to approach him with my hands and say, Luca, all right, boy. I'm now going to make contact as I take time to breathe myself. Breathing in and breathing out. Noticing how Luca is breathing, and then with my hands soft but firm, I'm gradually going to make contact and rest them. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is notice how he's responsive to my pressure. So using my full palm, I'm going to stroke all the way down the side of Luca, alternating hands. There are two ways, the directions you can go. I like to work right now in the direction that his coat moves. So we're doing a warm up using effleurage. There we go. With full fingers and thumbs. I restrict this to areas that include a lot of musculature, and you can certainly look up, depending upon what your companion pet's type is, you can look up muscle charts for dogs, for cats. Dr. Santo later today will show us the skeletal structure of a canine. This can be very helpful if you're doing long walks. And be sure to breathe in and breathe out. How we doing there, buddy? There's also a stroke that is used in classic massage called vibration. This can be very useful around joints, and I position my fingers to the point that I want to apply a little bit of pressure, and I gently rotate them back and forth, back and forth. There's also a variation on this stroke called tapotement, where I'm tapping ever so gently, and I'm doing that around his joint capsule, and I can feel where that is. And again, I'm using a pressure level that's about a 3 on a 1 to 10 scale. Let's see my time. Now, in doing massage with your animal companion, you want to limit it at first to just a few minutes to see how they do. What I found with Luca is he does well with less than 10 minutes of massage at a time. We already had a little bit this morning, so he is pretty relaxed right now. I'm going to do a little bit of compression around his shoulder, pressing in gently with the entire surface of my palm and my hand, pressing in and moving out. And when I do that, I use my entire body to gently put pressure, and I watch for his reaction. Ah, stretch. Okay. Hello. Hello. Is this all right? This is the next place then. How's that feel? Good. Now, there is a type of pressure that you can use that is aligned with the acupuncture points that Dr. Santo will tell us about in a little bit. And I could use those as well. But Luca seems to be drifting off just a little bit now. So before I think he's done, I'd like to show us a little Tellington touch. The Tellington touch approach is used with the flat of the hand and the fingers. It can also be used with just the fingertips. On a large area such as his shoulder, I'm going to use my entire hand, and I'm going to work in a clockwise motion, beginning at where 6 o'clock would be on a clock, moving in a complete circle and completing the circle 125%, and then I'm going to lift and move to another area. All right, buddy, here we go. We're going to demonstrate right here, flat hand, and I am moving the skin over the muscle and around. And then I lift and I reposition. Now, if you're using one hand, you might also take your second hand and use it as we sometimes call the mothering hand, to place it in a different place to let him know that he's grounded. And around and pause and breathe and around and breathe. And one more here for demonstration purposes, but I would continue all the way down to Luca's flank. Well, maybe I will. I think I have another minute here for demonstration, and around, and then around. Before I close completely, I'll show you one more Tellington touch. Now, the benefits again are relaxation, and they can also be used for deep calming. There is some recommendations for dogs, for example, who have thunderstorm anxiety, that this technique in particular is very useful. With it, I'm going to take my palm, I'm going to open up my fingers so that my index finger and thumb are aligned and my other three fingers are this way, and I'm going to very gently place them around Luca's ear. Ah, there we go. I don't know if you saw that, but his ear moved up, and I'm going to rotate now in a clockwise direction. This is part of the stroke. Luca likes this one in particular. We've practiced this before. He finds this calming. Should we show them the other one, buddy? Ah, maybe not. You might be done. Let's see. One more stroke is to use my fingertips and to move up the ridges of his ear. Ah, he's not interested in that. So if I was doing that, I would move my fingers up and off of the tip of his ear and up and off again. I think Luca is telling me now that he has had enough massage for right now. So, in keeping with the model, and also something that I know we all enjoy, is rather than abruptly stopping or trying to wake him out of this calm state, I'm going to very gently place my hands on Luca for closing. And I'm going to say thank you, Luca, for this time together, because I have found it to be very relaxing too. So, my experience is that those studies were true. Thank you, buddy. And now I'm going to give Luca a little blanket to cover him up to keep him warm. Yes. All right. Could I have the next slide, please? I would like to say something about Reiki for animals. I am a I've studied Reiki myself and I introduce it into my massage work. Some of you might know that Reiki is used with animals and widely used with people in a variety of different medical settings. It's an ancient Japanese energy medicine, and it is used in various levels. It does require training to master it, but we can all bring Reiki to our interactions with our animal companions as well as to each other. And included in the handout are references, including videos demonstrating the benefits. Reiki, though, is a very slow process, and it involves inviting your animal companion to, first of all, be receptive to your energy. It involves using your hands off the body as well as on the body. And it involves approaching gradually and sending the intention of healing and peace and love to our friends. I'm not going to demonstrate it now because Luca's already, I think, at his saturation point. He's told me that in a variety of different ways. So at this happy note, I'm going to hand this presentation over to Dr. Santo to continue with a different perspective on using skills with your animals. Thank you, Dr. Santo.
That was wonderful. Dr. Fortune, thank you so much. A lot of what you covered um, does absolutely dovetail into the second portion of my presentation today, which will be on acupuncture and acupressure. And as mentioned earlier, Kelli Hughart is not with us today, so I'm assuming her portion of the presentation, because as a naturopathic physician, which I'm clinically experienced in, as well as in acupuncture, I have quite a background as well in botanical medicine and have practiced it since 1997 when I began my clinical practice. So as I mentioned, I am dual degreed. I also have a degree in the practice of acupuncture and licensed to do that as well. So I'll get to that shortly. And these first few slides will deal with a few specific and hopefully practical uses of herbs for your companions. So no surprise that plant-based medicine has been around for millennia, cross-culturally throughout the world. And so we have a lot of evidence to support its use in a variety of settings, as well as for animals. So a few things to mention when considering an herbal protocol for your companion, your pet, that it's important to look at a number of safety considerations. It's best to choose formulas that are free of adulterations, pesticides, and chemicals. In other words, a reputable brand is a good start. And sometimes you'll find that, yes, there are cheaper versions of formulations out there or individual herbs. However, you want to be careful with those. And that goes the same with the human body, right? So our companions are in many ways more sensitive than we are. especially if you're going to take something, if they're going to administer something to them in the oral route. Their digestive systems are not like ours. They're largely carnivorous, and as a result, they're not going to process things as readily as we would, especially in the plant sort of capacity. And so I can't emphasize that enough, to choose, very well-known brands. One of my particular go-tos happens to be Gaia, the Gaia, out of North Carolina. And I've used them over the decades, and I know and I can vouch for instance, their brands. And there are a number of other quality companies out there that have been around a long time. And you can often read about where they're actually accessing and sourcing their particular plant materials for. Now, there are particular plants that are contraindicated for companions, and so it's important to read the profile of the particular plant you're using. For instance, I can't speak in generalities because dogs are very different than horses and are very different than cats. Each of those species has unique tolerances, and and sort of toxicity profiles will vary. Obviously, also when you're looking at dosing, these companions can be very varied in size, from a little ferret up to, again, a horse. So you have to, of course, consider the kilogram mass of the animal, and then dosing accordingly. A general rule I've used is a children's dose will often work for most um, uh, medium to large sized dogs, but an infantile dose is something you might consider for a small dog or most cats. So that's a general rule I've used. So I can't comment on the fourth bullet point here as far as foraging. That is not something I've typically done in my clinical practice. I've just done it for myself. And I can tell you that when you get a chance to actually handle the plant, the leaf, the root yourself, and then prepare it yourself, and in a variety of methods to do so, there's nothing like it. It's amazing. So you'll know what I'm talking about if you've ever just taken a basil leaf or a mint leaf and just squeezed the oils out of the leaf and then inhale it. And of course, that's a form of aromatherapy, so you know what I'm talking about. And so you understand the emotions and sort of the therapeutics that these plants characteristically have of themselves. So each plant is in fact known to have what's known as a signature, and it's how that plant makes you feel just by being around it, and you'll understand if you just be out in nature and do forest bathing what I'm talking about. So the last thing is you'll notice that point number 3 here talks about energetic considerations. What is that? And plants, aside from their biochemical and biochemical components and contributions, which were studied in Western herbology, there are the Eastern herbalists that from the Asian backgrounds of India and China, for instance, and Japan, that look at the energetic contributions of these plants. In other words, not the specific alkaloids that they possess, but instead, are they warming? Are they cooling? Are they drying? Are they moving? And those are very important when considering a particular plant for yourself or your companion. Next slide, please. So we're looking at a very commonly used herb for the cardiovascular system, but I'm talking specifically about the heart, not specifically, not about the peripheral vasculature. But the heart itself, and that is hawthorn, or known as Crataegus, and the SPP refers to the plural of species. So there's a number of species of the Crataegus genus that are used here. But when we talk about hawthorn, we're talking about the actual berry, and it's a very sweet berry. You can actually squeeze it in your hand, and it's often used as a food, both in humans and in companions, as a trophic meaning affinity toward a particular, in this case, organ or organ system. So its energetic properties are sour, sweet, warm, and dry. In other words, it's going to work very well in the heart as well as in the digestive system. So we look at sour, sweet, Those are particularly targeting of the liver, heart, and spleen and stomach. The spleen refers in Chinese medicine actually closer to the pancreas than the actual organic spleen that we know about. So again, as I mentioned, its benefits include heart health, antioxidant support, and also calm. This one tastes very good. Gaia makes it in a very thick syrup that, in fact, it tastes really good, and that is, in fact, a form you can give it to your companion, and they will enjoy it. Again, it's a food, and so no concerns here of overdosing on it. And otherwise, I should have mentioned this on the previous slide, methods of delivery, right? That's another consideration. Now, if you're going to give, for instance, a liquid form, you want to avoid alcohol-based tinctures. Alcohol is not compatible with pets. It's highly concentrated. It's usually a grain alcohol that's used in traditional herbal tinctures. You don't want to give that to pets. However, pet forms and also child, indicated forms indicated for children as well would be for in the form of glycerin-based tinctures, which were sweeter and very compatible for pets. Please, next slide. Just two more herbs. Stinging nettles. You want to think of stinging nettles, Urtica dioica, for allergies. Very commonly experienced in pets, especially because, again, due to their sensitive digestive tracts, the lungs are very connected energetically to the digestive tract, the small and large intestine particularly. So if gut health is out of balance, particularly the gut microbiome, it's going to show itself on the skin. This is where animals typically will get a lot of allergies, and especially in the ears. And really, it's unfortunate because this is where a lot of steroids are used in veterinary clinical circles, and it's so unnecessary when, for one thing, you change the diet, and also then you can use something like stinging nettles to help sort of stave off that excessive histamine and response, and reduce what's known as urticaria or extreme itching. And you'll see the indications here for, in addition to allergy relief, because of its high silica content, it's good for skin and coat health. Joint support, again, because silica benefits not only the skin, but also the joints. And because of its energetic qualities, particularly cooling and for the salty component is where it actually benefits the urinary tract and for the kidneys. Bitter and cooling. By the way, you'll typically use those for detoxing. Okay, so beneficial to the liver in particular. And the drying aspect is important when you're dealing with a phlegmy type condition, which is, again, if it's a strong histamine response, or you'll see a lot of mucus in their elimination, that is a time when you want to use a drying herb like stinging nettle. Next slide, please, April. Last one here is ashwagandha. Withania somnifera, the species gives away its main use. If you think about somnifera refers to sleep. And so it is a wonderful sleep aid. This herb targets the HPA axis, which is why it's so widely used worldwide, and its origins are out of the Ayurvedic realm. So we know that it's wonderfully warming, sweet, at the same time slightly bitter, as well as pungent. Pungent is even beyond drying in its ability to move phlegm and stuck qi, if you will, through, for instance, the joints and the circulatory system. It's a wonderful, very complex herb, but primarily consider this one in regard to its benefits of the HPA axis. That's all I'll say about that one. Let's move on. I believe that wraps up the plants. Oh, I have one more on CBD. I'm bringing this up because it's so widely available, widely used, and I'll let you know. CBD is the chemical name for it. The compound is cannabidiol, and cannabidiol was first isolated in 1940 from the hemp plant, and it's non-psychoactive in that it it contains less than 0.3% THC. Thus, it is fully legal in the United States. You'll see it in most pet stores, Petco, PetSmart, right there at the checkout counter. Its pain indications are pain, inflammation, epilepsy, and also depression and anxiety. It does come with some side effects, though. You'll want to watch for vomiting, disorientation, ataxia, which is a sort of confusion and loss of coordination. Main delivery forms, you'll see it, and again, you would not have it delivered in an alcohol form. Most of the time, it's a concentrated oil form, or and in the stores you'll see it. Pet stores, you'll see it as a gummy or other treat. It's disguised in a treat. But again, choose a healthy, form that's non-allergenic as far as the treat. That goes without saying. But if the animal's already suffering from allergies, you don't want to give it a wheat, for instance, wheat-based treat to keep it simple, or put it in an existing treat or on their food that you're already working with. You may have questions about this later, but I'm going to move on just because of time. I'm going to cover acupuncture in just a few minutes here. These are the sarin needles, S-E-R-I-N, and I know that because of the colorful handles on the needles, and you want to use them, these needles particularly, because they won't get lost in the fur, right? So acupuncture and acupressure can be thought of interchangeably. The latter, in fact, goes or works under the framework of the former, in that you're talking about the same points. It's just a matter of the application. One uses needles, one uses the actual hands. It can be practiced under the same underlying principles as with humans. Yin-yang theory and five-element theory are the two dominant forms of education or the curricula that are sort of administered to students in the West and worldwide. The modern theories, though, are probably the ones you're going to actually experience more with pets, because they are more practical, if you will. What Dr. Fortune, for instance, was applying to pressure to certain muscles, for instance, that's an example of a modern theory, also known as the local treatment, versus the theory-based treatment, which is something that you would more consider in the human model. Primary applications, again, why would you consider acupuncture? Well, pain, injury, surgical recovery, and stress reduction. They love it. Now you'll notice this one here in the scalp. If you were to go a little bit lower, just follow the midline of this little puppy's skull there, right between the eyebrows, there's a point called yin tang that is great to massage. If you can massage that area just where the eyebrows would connect, and that would put them in a very relaxed state, oftentimes getting them to relax so that they can, in fact, experience the entire length of the treatment. And it can be used as an adjunct or in lieu of pain meds, which is important because sometimes pain meds are contraindicated. Let's go to the next slide, please. Let's jump to one more. Thank you. So the three major neurophysiological models, I won't spend too much time here, but this is where the Western sort of framework of how acupuncture works is sort of depicted in this graphic. At the base of this dog's skull, at the top, you'll see the suprasegmental application. In other words, that's where the brainstem is. And when you access there or on the scalp or on the ears, you actually will you will have access to the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, interestingly enough. Lower down, if you follow the spine, on the right, you see segmental. What is that? Well, if you're, it's isolating the nerve root there. If you're able to identify a particular vertebral level that you want to massage or needle, then you're actually going to not only benefit that local area on the spine, but also the distal area down the leg. You see where the line is following down, in this case, to the dog's the back of the knee there. So that is the nice thing, because the spinal nerves will feed that area. It's the same thing in humans. And then, of course, the local area, you can actually needle that point right there behind the knee. And so those are the different sort of applications of theory. Next slide, please, April. I know I'm speaking fast, but this is an overview. And so I wanted you to take notice here of the similarity of the in this case, a wolf, to the human skeleton. Now, they have the same vertebral structure and skeletal structure as we do for the large part. They have, where we have, in fact, we both have the same number of cervical vertebrae. That's the vertebrae in the neck. We each have 7. That's between us and a dog, and I believe it's the same with a cat. Well, they have 13 thoracic vertebrae. The thoracic vertebrae, you'll know where they are because they're connected they connect to and make joints with or articulations with the rib cage. So there are 13 ribs, 13 thoracic, and we in fact have 12. So the human vertebrae are in the parentheses. And while they have 7 lumbar, which is in the low back, we have 5. The sacrum only differs in shape, but that's the case even with male and female, humans. The sacrums are different shapes. And then there's the coccyx. That's the tailbone, and that varies per breed. Humans have a vestigial tail of 5 fused coccygeal vertebrae, and then it's going to depend on the dog, right? Or the average house cat, for instance, has 28 coccygeal vertebrae. So yes, the tailbone can fracture, and that's not uncommon, but can also be needled. So I find that's fascinating. And just one quick aside, the Museum of Natural History, what I love to do is look at the prehistoric skeletons, and I noticed that the giant tree sloth from the Ice Age has basically the same skeletal structure when it's standing on its hind legs as the modern day human. So I've always found that interesting. I love comparative anatomy because really the origins they all go back to the same. One more slide, please. How are these delivered? Now, when we're talking about needling, okay, you can see this horse here has got needles in them, and those are not the sarin needles. So you can see that they don't have the colorful handles, but horses don't have long hair. The most effective for pain and inflammation is electroacupuncture. You actually attach electrodes to the needles, and you have a battery-powered source, much like a TENS unit, if you know what that is. And it's a very low-level current, usually delivered through a 9-volt battery, and it's very it feels great because it immediately relieves pain, or especially around joints. Dry needling is the most realistic. You put the needle in, you take it out. What Dr. Fortune was showing, for instance, with the manual pressure in the muscle, that is great with dry needling, and that is in fact what is done with most allied health professionals, such as physical therapists. Whereas you might leave for a more traditional treatment, treating more than just, say, physical pain, you might leave the needles in up to 45 minutes. Say you're treating organic condition or a mental emotional condition. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. I see where my time is really at its I've exceeded it. And if you'll take a look at the next slide, you'll see I've given some resources as to who can practice both acupuncture and acupressure. And if you want more information on where to find state by state, you can go to these 2 resources at the bottom of my slide, as well as at the end of the presentation. Thank you so much, everybody, and apologies for going over.
Thanks so much, Dr. Santo. And just to really wrap that up, as Dr. Santo mentioned, acupuncture must be conducted by a licensed professional. Acupressure may be slightly more accessible, though do keep in mind that practicing acupressure with your animal companion does presume that you already have a trusting relationship with that animal companion. Next slide. So it's time for us to wrap this up and leave a little time at the end for questions. We hope that this gave you kind of an overview, both of some practical techniques that you can use to deepen your bond and your relationship with your animal companion, and also an understanding of the literature, the robust literature that supports these practices. And finally, how this particular discussion, relates to and is rooted in the humanistic context that Saybrook celebrates and identifies with. So in closing, just to share this quote from Mark Bekoff, let us remember that animals are not mere resources for human consumption. They are splendid beings in their own right who have evolved alongside us as co-inheritors of all the beauty and abundance of life on this planet. And so as we wrap up and move into our question and answer portion, April, I want to invite you to just briefly show the last 2 slides, which are our references, so that we can get those for the recording.